This morning I've come to Ruardean, a village in the Forest of Dean, about 3.5 miles northwest of Cinderford. It is situated on a hillside high above the River Wye, with fantastic views towards the mountains of South Wales. In the past, the village has been an important centre of iron and coal mining, though little evidence remains of this aspect of the village's history. Historically, the village was spelt Ruardyn and was part of Herefordshire. Nowadays the village lies inside Gloucestershire and is part of the Forest of Dean district. The main historical landmark of the village is Ruardean Castle, near to the parish church. Today, St John the Baptist Church, dating from 1111 AD, is the village's centrepiece and main landmark, including a nave, chancel, tower and spire added in the 14th century, and a chapel added in 1798. A manor house, which once stood in the fields behind the church, was crenellated in 1310 to become Ruardean Castle, but this was largely destroyed by Oliver Cromwell's troops in the English Civil War. A notable event in Ruardean's history occurred in 1889. 4 Frenchmen and their 2 bears were making their way to Ruardean, having performed in Cinderford. They were attacked by an angry mob, enraged by claims that the bears had killed a child and injured a woman. The bears were killed and the Frenchmen badly beaten. It soon became clear that the bears had not attacked anyone. Police proceedings followed, and a week later 13 colliers and labourers appeared before magistrates at Littledean, charged with ill-treating and killing the bears and assaulting the Frenchmen. All but 2 were found guilty on 1 or more charges, with another convicted a week later. A total of £85 was paid in fines, a huge amount in those days. A subscription was also launched, which generously compensated the Frenchmen. The term, "Who killed the bears?" existed for many years as an insult, directed particularly towards the people of Ruardean, despite the fact that all those convicted were claimed to have been from Cinderford. Unfortunately, census and jail records now available end that speculation. Of the 8 men found guilty of causing the death of the bears, 6 were from Ruardean, 1 from Drybrook and 1 from Harrow Hill. Ruardean's amenities include a good shop and post office, a chip shop, a primary school, a hair studio, a service station, a garden pottery, self-catering cottages and an organic farm shop. Ruardean's Congregationalist minister in the early 19th century was Reverend John Horlick. His relatives, James and William, were born in Ruardean and are today known worldwide for their hot malt drink, Horlicks. The shed, in which they first developed the technique of producing dried milk with malt in the 1860s, still stands behind the local pub on the High Street. The Malt Shovel Inn, which dates from 1110, has recently been restored, and now contains windows salvaged from 10 Downing Street. I never visited Ruardean very much during my visits to the Forest of Dean, but when I have been here, I have to say, I think this village must have some of the best views in the forest. Well, this is where my walk starts and ends today. My route lay to the west along the road towards Joy's Green. I turned left into Caudle Lane, which quickly became School Lane, and climbed quite steeply to reach Kingsway Lane, where I turned right. At the top of the lane there was a bench where I stopped to take a look at the views across Ruardean and beyond. At a sharp bend in the road, I turned off onto an excellent path between stone walls, tall hedges and fences, with horticulture on the right and an open agricultural landscape on the left. I emerged from the enclosed path to cross a sheep walk, and then crossed a stile to follow the other side of the hedge across another large field. From here I enjoyed superb views across the Forest of Dean, and I could make out where I would be visiting later on today as part of my walk. Finally, I took a clear path through a field to reach Eddy's Lane. At this point, there were superb views over the Wye Valley, where the river loops around between Goodrich and Welsh Bicknor. I followed a track which now headed easily across the plateau. In a short while, I arrived in the hamlet of Readings, perched sensationally above the Wye Valley, with the river seen below and to the right. My track ended on a sharp bend in a lane, from where I bore right to drop down steeply in the direction of Joy's Green, views of which I could see ahead of me. Soon I reached the common land of Horsley, where a delightful isolated beer house, the Mason's Arms, survived until the early years of the 21st century, but sadly no longer refreshes travellers. Where the road went around a bend to the right, 200 metres after the old pub, I turned left up a good path and climbed steeply in the direction of High Beach. At the top, I turned right along High Beach Road and followed it as it curved to the left towards my next port of call. Eventually, the lane entered the former squatter settlement of the Pludds. Well, I've arrived at the Pludds, and this is where I'm going to stop briefly for a while just to have my lunch. The name of this hamlet originates from the Middle English word plud or plod, meaning a pool or puddle. The area became known as the Pludds by 1787. One of the oldest surviving houses, Pludds Court, dates from the late 18th or early 19th century. Occasional building continued at the Pludds after 1840, and a beer house called the Royal Oak had opened by 1891. In the late 19th and early 20th century, there was a coal shaft known as Pludds, just southwest of the hamlet, which formed part of the Lidbrook Colliery. The hamlet had shops, a beer house, a choral society, and a cricket club, but these had all been closed or been disbanded by 1990. The village hall, built in 1975, continues in use. At a junction, I went right, then immediately left across the left-hand edge of a small common. Reaching a group of cottages, I took the path going straight on here. As I climbed between hedges, I unexpectedly, but very pleasantly, met a friendly local resident. Looks like I made a friend. Wants to come with me. Can't come with me. Hello. 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 All right, you can overtake me then, eh? Should we have a race? I left my newfound friend to continue on his way before he vanished completely. Meeting a lane, I went left onto Barn Lane, leading past Knight's Hill, where the first farm had been established by 1608, and the tiny Methodist chapel that has long been converted into a house. A path descended steeply beyond the farm, along which I curved right through a very deeply incised valley. Reaching the end of another lane, I bore left, continuing along Barn Lane, which was now a splendid grassy track. The lane climbed on grass and gravel before becoming a surface lane again, as I reached the edge of the hamlet of Ruardean Woodside. Ruardean Woodside is a village tucked away behind Ruardean Hill and Brierley. There is a primary school and a village hall. The Roebuck was the last of the local pubs to close. The Pennant Sandstone Hills here have the highly productive Coleford High Delf coal seam at their base, and hamlets grew rapidly in the early 19th century alongside several mines. I crossed a road onto Baker's Piece Road, a very narrow lane running between old cottages. At the end of it, I turned left, ignoring the footpath sign pointing straight on, and climbed towards a prominent house on the ridge. A stile led onto a road, but I turned left just before the stile to cross a series of fields at the very top of the valley, with superb views south to the Forest Call. The view gradually opened out to the west, and then suddenly to the north, with the tall spire of Ruardean Church in front of Chase Wood. I crossed a stile to find a little walled lane, which met the road descending through Turner's Tump, and back into the centre of Ruardean, where I began today's walk. Well, now that I've completed the walk, if the malt shovel's open, I'm going to go and treat myself to half a cider.